Hope your week is off to a great start. I'm Min Sun-hee with our panel of foreign journalists. Welcome to the show.
Nice to be back, thanks.
As witnessed in recent times, the diplomatic missions of leaders of countries also expose their wives to much media attention. In this edition of Foreign Correspondents, we take a look at the first ladies of the world and the roles they play.
Last week, the leaders of Asia-Pacific nations were busy discussing a number of diplomatic issues during the APEC summit and the ASEAN summit. In these diplomatic stages, there are those who receive as much attention as the world leaders. The main figures behind soft diplomacy, they are the First Ladies. South Korea's First Lady Kim Jung-sook was also involved during President Moon Jae-in's diplomatic Super Week, providing him with full support. During her trip to Southeast Asia, First Lady Kim Jung-sook was just as busy as President Moon, demonstrating taekwondo in Indonesia and visiting a mural village in Vietnam. Right before her trip to Southeast Asia, First Lady Kim Jung-sook served persimmons she personally dried herself to First Lady Melania Trump during the Korea-US summit. Many even stated that she contributed to improvement of Korea-China relations by visiting an exhibition of famous Chinese artists with the Chinese ambassador to South Korea and his wife this past August.
애써주신 청와대 직원 여러분들하고 국민 여러분께 정말로 감사의 마음을 전하고 싶습니다.
On the other hand, First Lady Melania Trump showcased a brilliant fashion diplomacy while traveling around Asia with President Trump for 13 days. On her first trip to Japan, she wore a red dress, which was reminiscent of the traditional Japanese clothing kimono. On her trip to Korea, she wore a coat that was similar to a chogori, or the upper garment of a hanbok. Whether it be the dress that she wore during her trip to China, which resembled the traditional Chinese clothing qipao, First Lady Melania Trump showcased her excellent taste in fashion in consideration of the countries she visited. And the First Lady of China, Liyuan, was seen wearing a gorgeous qipao as she took part in both cultural diplomacy and fashion diplomacy. In 2014, during her visit to Korea, she showed a sense of affinity by talking about Korean dramas. During her visit to the US this past April, she even visited an art school as she watched performances and encouraged the students. First ladies are actively engaging in diplomacy in their own unique ways. Their soft power has had a considerable impact on exchanges and cooperation around the world.
What are your impressions of First Lady Kim Jung-sook, Don?
Well, I have quite a good impression. Actually, she seems like a very nice person. She's very courteous, mannerly. She also seems involved in civic matters. She seems like a humane person. So I think that she, to me, exudes nothing but a positive impression, I have to say.
What about you, Koichi?
I like her smile. When I look at her in TV, she seems to be always smiling, and I think that creates some positive atmosphere. But also the best thing is so far there's no hint of any scandal. When we look back at the just former president family's scandal, it's very important.
Right, Frank.
Well, what I like about her is she seems to be kind of down to earth, something like her husband, President Moon. I think about recent reports about her preparations for the Moon-Trump summit. She prepared much of the foods herself, and I'm thinking of a photograph of her reading the paper with her slippers off with persimmon drying that she had picked, persimmon drying hanging from strings on the grounds of the Cheongwon-dae, the Blue House, the presidential compound. And I think again of her husband being a kind of down-to-earth person. That's the impression I get. I also get the impression that she's kind of lighthearted. There was an instance at the ASEAN summit in the Philippines where there was a Korean singer singing Psy's Gangnam Style to everybody, and she broke into a horse dance wearing a hanbok and really kind of lightened the mood. And so I think she's doing a good job.
Right. Now, like your positive views, here in Korea also a recent survey shows that she enjoys a support base of around 70%. What do you think is the reason behind her popularity among the Koreans, Don?
Well, I think her popularity, I think that she, you know, does get out with people, and she does go to events where she, to me, indicates a concern for ordinary people and for, you know, the lifestyles and the customs of just plain people, as opposed to being up there with, you know, the elite. So I think that, as Frank pointed out, her down-to-earth style is appealing.
Do you agree, Koichi?
Yeah, I think so. One interesting is when I compared her to First Lady Lee Hee-ho, they are totally different person. Lee Hee-ho was a wife of President Kim Dae-jun and former women's rights activist, and she herself is a sort of political figure. But Kim Jong-sook, First Lady, is more modest and kind image, and she is appealing to public in totally different way.
Different manner. Do you remember the incident involving a protester outside her private residence right before her move into the presidential office? There was a female protester who was there to talk about a personal matter that took place 12 years ago, and she had an office building somewhere near Kungdok subway station, and the building was demolished to make way for the Incheon International Airport Railroad. And she claimed that she had got no financial compensation because of a secret dealing between the land ministry and the construction company. She was there to share her woes. The First Lady comes out, claims, I don't know much about your woes, but I just heard you also claim that you were hungry, because the protester had spoken about being hungry. And she asked the lady whether she would join her, the First Lady Kim Jung-sook, at home for ramyeon.
That's what I mean when I say that she indicates a concern for ordinary people and humanitarian instincts and so forth, which I think are quite popular and really help the image of the presidency, not only her, but her husband.
Right. Often her image is also contrasted with former President Park Geun-hye's image.
Yes, there's a big contrast.
And I think what you mentioned is kind of, you know, exceptional. What's important, getting to what Koichi mentioned about the previous First Lady Lee Hee-ho, is that they have totally different sort of spheres in which they might work as a First Lady. And I think the most important thing for someone fulfilling that position is that they play to their own strengths and they don't try to overreach in terms of what they might be doing in their capacity as First Lady. I think people would be more worried if somebody with less political experience was to become more involved in politics. And I think back to Nancy Reagan, who, you know, reportedly had a member of the occult or somebody that was believed in the occult advising her, and her again, you know, trying to influence Ronald Reagan in different directions based on this outside influence. And so I think it's important again that the First Lady play to their strengths, whatever they might be.
Do you believe that First Lady Kim Jong-sook's popularity also positively influences perhaps the image of the president here in Korea?
Definitely, sure. Frankly, the president, I think, has quite a good image as it is. He seems like a very decent individual, and he has not given up his liberal promises, even though it's difficult to carry out some of them. But I think that definitely her presence enhances his presidency, and certainly enhances her general popularity as well. So I think that she's an asset, as we might say, in general for the Blue House.
What about in the US? What is the impression, the public opinion, that is, of First Lady Melania Trump?
I think she's rather well liked, to tell you the truth. I think that she would rank quite higher on popularity polls than her husband, to be honest. She seems to be, of course, she's good looking. She's a very attractive woman, and keeps herself very trim and so forth. She has a special diet, which I've just been reading about. But I think that she also seems rather modest and withdrawn and quite warm and polite, all of which I think enhances her image. So people like Melania. I mean, everybody loves Melania. I don't know if I speak for everybody, but I think most people really like her. I don't think the same can be said for her husband's popularity ratings.
She was also in Japan accompanying her husband, First Lady Melania Trump. How is she received by the Japanese public?
Well, yes, it's same in America. In America, she was more, I think she was very welcomed in Japan. But in Japan, just a couple of days before that, you know, her daughter Ivanka also came, and I think media coverage is a little bit more on her.
Ivanka may not be so popular, actually. She's obviously a business person, and she seems to be concerned with her foreign interests and investments, although she claims to have dissociated herself from them. And her husband is, you know, in other words, the son-in-law of the president is one of his top advisors, even though he really isn't qualified in many respects. So I think that Ivanka is not so popular, but I think that Melania really contrasts with Ivanka.
At the start of the new US administration, there was talk about how Ivanka Trump, the first daughter, was taking on the role of the First Lady. What do you suppose, Frank, led to such speculation?
Well, I think Dawn sort of pointed to that. She's quite a bit more ambitious and more involved in business internationally, and I think that's part of what I mentioned earlier, a sort of, you know, a problematic development in that people that haven't been elected are having an influence on policy, like Jared Kushner and like Ivanka, and that's something that I think the public really, you know, is skeptical about. You don't see that with Melania, and she has the kind of style that people think back to Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, and I think people have a very positive recollection of her, and that is again reflects positively, I think, on Melania.
There was also a lot of talk about Melania Trump's fashion diplomacy. And speaking about fashion diplomacy, Chinese First Lady Peng Liyuan was also mentioned by the media for her fashion. What are your thoughts about the Chinese First Lady, Koichi?
Well, I think as long as I know, she is the first lady who played an active role as a First Lady in China. So that's one thing, and also she was very, very popular before she became First Lady as a professional singer. So of course she has this huge talent to attract people's attention naturally. So that is a huge resource for her.
Do you suppose her past profession as a singer also perhaps positively affected her husband's image among the Chinese?
Definitely.
Yes, I would say she was even much more famous than him prior to his rise to his political position. She was the main singer on the celebratory New Year's in China, like huge productions, televised productions, nationwide televised productions. She was the main singer for those. She was actually quite talented. Also, when she auditioned to get into singing, she competed with many other students and won her position because of her ear. She couldn't actually read music when she first auditioned to go to music school. She's somebody that really rose because of her talent. What's very interesting, I find, is that this relationship, or there's a commonality here. Kim Jung-sook is a trained singer as well. And the Canadian Prime Minister's wife was an entertainment reporter, and she's actually sung at some of a little bit a cappella at some of the speeches that she's given. So there is a commonality of entertainment and I guess of vocal talent amongst some first ladies around the world.
Right. In this next report, we take a look at some of the headlines, both positive and negative, triggered by some of the first ladies of the world.
First ladies are always at the side of their life partners who lead their respective nations. In the past, the First ladies simply played the role of a good wife, but recently their role has been expanded as a political partner and policy advisor to the president. Michelle Obama, the wife of Barack Obama, the 44th President of the United States, is one of the most prominent figures in this new aspect of First Ladies.
Barack and I were raised with so many of the same values. Like, you work hard for what you want in life. That your word is your bond, that you do what you say you're gonna do. That you treat people with dignity and respect, even if you don't know them, and even if you don't agree with them.
Former First Lady Michelle Obama has always interacted with the people in both intellectual and humorous ways. In a survey conducted just before former President Obama left office, the results showed that Michelle Obama was more popular than the president himself. On the other hand, there are even cases where a First Lady undermined the political strength of her spouse. Back in March, Japan was rocked by a huge scandal involving First Lady Akie Abe. The scandal involved First Lady Akie Abe allowing a private education firm to purchase land at a heavily discounted cost. With this scandal, the Abe administration's approval rating dropped to the 30% range. Meanwhile, French President Macron's wife Brigitte was at the center of a controversy over her official functions. During his presidential campaign, President Macron had promised to give his wife the official title of First Lady. However, citizens protested against the fact that the First Lady's activities will mean more tax money being spent at a time when the government is pushing for new austerity measures.
D'une élection, on vote pour quelqu'un, on vote pas pour sa conjointe ou son conjoint. On connaît rien de ses idées, il n'y a aucune raison qu'on ait un statut de première dame ou de premier conjoint.
In the end, President Macron, who was struggling with falling approval ratings, suspended his decision to grant the title of First Lady to his wife. As the spouse of a nation's top leader, the First Lady focuses on his each and every move. And up next, we'll discuss her role and influence.
Essentially, what role should First Ladies play? I'll ask this question to all of you. We'll start with you, Don. What role should First Ladies play?
Well, I think the First Lady has to be a great hostess, has to be gracious, has to know how to deal with visitors high and low and in between. I guess that's the traditional role. Some people think the First Lady should go beyond that role and show real social interest and social activism and so forth, which is true to an extent. But if they overdo it, then they can lose their popularity. Melania hopefully will remain as she is, a gracious, nice person.
Koichi, in your opinion, what role should First Ladies play?
Well, there are ordinarily First Ladies' duty, like as you said, hosting dinner party or something like that. But also, it is important for them to encourage people to focus on some important social issue which has been neglected. So if they influence to a very big issue, then it might cause problem. But they have attention, so they have to use their attention in that way. That's personally, I think.
I see. As public figures, perhaps invest time in charity.
Yeah, right.
I see.
Like girls' education, like Michelle Obama, or something like that. Yeah.
Frank, what do you believe they should?
Well,
focus on?
I agree with Dawn. I think it's important that they're a good host. I do feel a little bit awkward actually talking about this issue with three males. Essentially with a host. And I hope that, there'll be a time in the future, as a father to a daughter, that we'll be talking about for spouses a little bit more. But getting back into the role, I think it depends on the First Lady. If the First Lady had been active in civic and social organizations prior to her spouse becoming the leader of a country, then I think that they could continue in that role and even deepen that role. But if they're not involved in those organizations, then I think that they should be limited and not overreach in terms of the duties that they pursue in their roles.
I think Michelle Obama actually was one of the better, if not one of the best First Ladies, because she not only was gracious and so forth, not only was a nice person, but she also was an intelligent person who did take social interests and showed her social interests. She comes from a fine educational background, and she certainly didn't discard that. She played the role of a socially interested person as well as a gracious hostess. Then we have a couple of other notable first ladies. What about Hillary?
I think, I think that's a good example that you bring up Michelle Obama and Hillary, because I think Hillary actually damaged herself by being more involved politically when Bill Clinton was president, and that maybe perhaps haunted her when she herself ran for president. What do you think about that, Don?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it was because of what she did while Bill was president that led her to run for president herself. That's no small thing, just running. And she did get more votes than did Donald Trump. So it had both a positive and negative effect. A lot of people don't like Hillary, but a lot of people think she's just great too, I have mixed feelings about her role as First Lady. Two of the more popular First Ladies in their own ways were Laura Bush and Barbara Bush. Laura, the wife of George W. Bush, Barbara, the wife of George H.W. Bush. They were nothing but gracious, decent people, and I don't recall a lot of social activism, but they did stand up for the right things, and they did seem interested in humanity.
Koichi, what is the public opinion of First Lady Akie Abe? She was involved in a scandal earlier in the year.
Originally, she was a kind of person that raised her voice against her husband. She was famous for that. She has some kind of liberal point of view compared to her husband, especially on nuclear energy issue or environmental issues. So as you mentioned that she was involved in that Moritomo scandal, she became an honorary principal of this very conservative elementary school. That's blemished her popularity.
I see. What about in Canada, Frank? The First Lady there, Sophie Trudeau, I understand she enjoys popularity.
Yeah, she is. She was involved in media previous to her position as First Lady. Actually, in Canada, First Lady isn't an official position. So one of the sort of controversies surrounding her is that she asked for more help. She has one personal assistant that's paid by the Canadian government, and she asked for more help with dealing with official correspondences and things like that, and it caused quite a bit of a storm in Canada, people arguing that the Canadian taxpayer shouldn't pay for people to help her out with her duties as the wife of the Prime Minister. And then she was attacked by conservatives. We have a liberal prime minister now, Justin Trudeau. And then people look back to Mila Mulroney, who was the wife of a conservative prime minister who had 3 personal assistants. We need to recognize that these first ladies get a tremendous amount of correspondence, something like 50 letters a day. They need to answer those letters to be responsible in their positions, and then they're asked to speak at various events and support various charities. It's really quite a bit of work, and I think that the government should support those women and hopefully in the future spouses, male spouses.
Right, before we go then, in your opinions, what more could First Ladies do while their husbands are in office? Or what more would you like to see them do while their husbands are in office? We'll start with you, Don.
So I think that they have to be gracious and kind, and at the same time show an interest in people, as long as it doesn't become politicized.
What about you, Koichi?
I think every leader or politician have a strong points and weak points. So these First Lady or First Spouse can cover that weaker area.
Hope to balance their spouse's power. Okay, what about you, Frank?
Well, I agree with Don a little bit, getting involved in social activism, but I think that should be sort of channeled to areas that have no chance to be controversial charitable organizations that don't have any sort of potential to be political. I think are great if First Ladies can get involved in those types of things. And I think that they've been very successful in doing that. If you look back at perhaps the most famous First Lady that wasn't really a First Lady, Princess Di, she did a tremendous job in supporting social causes.
Right, a survey earlier this year, 500 adults, showed that 9 out of 10 respondents took into account a presidential candidate's spouse before casting their ballots in favor of a particular candidate. The findings go to show that here in Korea, a leader's spouse does play a significant role in helping pave the path, political path that is, of her partner. Thank you for watching.